All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Hannah Frizee, and I am a programming librarian here at Cary Memorial Library. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the Cary Library Foundation for sponsoring this program. Their support is what allows us to run wonderful programs like the one we will be having tonight. This program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. And if you have any questions for Olivia, feel free to enter them into the Q&A or the chat, and I will make time to go over them at the end so we can get some more info if need be. And now I'd like to introduce our guest. Olivia Migacz is a hiker and blogger with many years and miles of experience. She moved to New England from Texas soon after, and it wasn't long before she began to take on the area's famous 4,000-foot peaks. Through the initial experience, she quickly learned what she wished she had on a trail, and with each experience in the mountains came new lessons learned. Since then, she's hiked all 115 Northeast 4,000 footers, thru-hiked the Northville-Placid Trail, and last summer completed the Northeast Ultra 8. If you want to learn more about her hikes, feel free to check out her beautiful blog, oliviaoutside.com. So now please join me in welcoming Olivia.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hannah. Hey, y'all. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited to dive into all things winter hiking. So we're going to get started with actually just a little bit of an overview of what we'll talk about tonight. So I'm going to start off a little bit about me, how I got into hiking, from just going from small little Texas parks and trails to, like Hannah said, some of the highest peaks in the Northeast. We're going to talk about hiking preparation. So from short hikes under an hour to those kind of middle hikes, half-day hikes, and then full-day hikes for winter. And then if you have a furry friend, what it's like to hike with the dog, some things to consider. And then finally, Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat, and Hannah will be sure to get those out to me by the end. So how I started, as Hannah said, I'm from Texas. And so I actually spent a summer up here in New England, up in Massachusetts here. And I spent one weekend that I had and decided after did kind of what a typical person does. I saw a cool photo of a hike and said, I want to do it. So I recruited a friend, convinced her to join, and we ended up on this hike in this photo that you can see. And that's the Franconia Ridge line, two very famous peaks in the White Mountains. And my first experience with real hiking, or I guess what I considered real serious hiking. So it was 8.5 miles. We were not prepared, clearly, but we got there. We thought we were prepared. We had done all of our, packing, our prepping. I borrowed a backpack. I put on old running shoes, cotton, everything. We thought we needed peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so we grabbed all of that. We didn't prepare it in advance. We threw the peanut butter and the jelly jars into the backpack. And as we were hiking up, we passed this awesome waterfall, and we really just started to get into hiking. And as we were going up on the trail, we got to this view and we were so excited to eat our sandwiches. And then I realized that I left the peanut butter and the knife in the car. So we ended up loving this view with our bread, dipping it into jelly, into the jar, and then continuing on the hike. So again, one of my favorite hikes. Mostly for the views, but also just the memories of how, I guess, inexperienced I was at the time and just kind of how much I've learned since then. So that was with a friend. And then I ended up moving the following year up here to New England and stayed away from the 4,000 footers for a little bit and dove into some beginner hikes in New Hampshire just whenever I had time. I was teaching full-time. I still teach full-time, but kind of enjoy the weekends for the adventures. And so I ended up spending one of our summers off in New Hampshire. And again, still straight away from the 48. It felt a little much to do 4,000 footers at the time, and just started going around local trails. So I was just looking up things online. I read a lot of blogs. I read a lot of trail conditions. And we just do 1 to 2 mile hikes in the area, mostly around the lakes region. And then whenever I was back home in Western Mass, any kind of hikes in this area that I was exploring. But it wasn't until probably 2 or 3 years of living here that I decided to aim for the 48. And so I'd already had those two under my belt. My roommates at the time, we ended up doing 2 other of the 48 kind of accidentally. One of our roommates planned it. We didn't really know it was part of the 48. And then I realized, just how much fun it was hiking when I was a bit more properly prepared. And so I decided to take on the 48, which I love a good list. And that actually led me to a few other lists along the way. So after doing the 48 and learning a lot through that, told myself I was good after that. And of course, the mountains kind of called back. So I did the Vermont 5 after that, and then Maine, and then decided to tackle 46 very, very tough hikes in the Adirondacks up in upstate New York. So overall, those make up the 115 highest peaks in the Northeast, and kind of how I guess, got into hiking along the way. So some of those are kind of intense, but there are a few other lists that you could check out if you are interested. Again, doesn't have to be a 4,000 footer to be a hike. There are so many hikes in this area. I feel like we're very, very fortunate to live in the area that we do, whether it's Massachusetts. Connecticut has some awesome hiking. New Hampshire, of course, as I mentioned, but there are a few hikes that do have lists, New Hampshire in particular, but there's also other lists that you can kind of create on your own. There's people who look at the trustees' properties, which is in that picture right there. One of my favorite hikes here in Western Mass is Peaked Mountain, and nice 1.5 miles-ish, maybe a mile up to the summit, lots of different trails around, and it's part of the trustees' properties, which is awesome. They have dozens of properties. So some people make it a hiking goal or a list of theirs to go and hike in all of the trustees' properties or to go visit them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, if you are just trying to dabble in hiking or especially winter hiking and it feels a little overwhelming, it doesn't need to be an 8.5 mile hike in old running shoes with a couple thousand feet of elevation gain without peanut butter. It can be any trails. If you wanted to hike Wachusett Mountain, there's 10 or so trails there. You could want to just aspire to do all 10 there. Something I've been getting into now that I've completed the 115 is Ben Kimball is a trail runner out in Western Mass, and he is also a writer. So he's compiled these trail runs that he does into books. So I purchased his Western Mass book, and it has about 50 different routes. And so I run some of them, I hike most of them, but it does give me an opportunity to kind of see different spots in this area that I normally would not have looked at. So probably areas I would have overlooked in an effort to like chase another list. But he also has one for Eastern Mass. So definitely something that I'm going to explore more. But again, you don't need to follow a list or chase a list, as some might say, but it does give you a nice goal to strive for. So lists aside, there is a lot that goes into preparing for these hikes. So starting out, each hike has different lengths. So like I said, if you're going to go visit a trustee's property and you're going to hike 2 miles, very, very different than a hike for several hours up to New York's highest peak, Mount Marcy. Each one takes a different amount of effort, a different amount of preparation. And again, a couple things that I've learned along the way. One of which, a great resource that's really come a long way in the last several years is AllTrails. I used to be kind of against it. It never felt accurate to me years ago. But in the last couple of years, it has been a great resource for me. I do pay that $35.99 that I list there as the annual fee. Sometimes there are discounts or deals that they do. So definitely look out for those. But overall, it's a great app to use if you are visiting a new area. Maybe you are in Maine and you want to go and do a hike. You can look up the area that you're in, zoom into a specific spot, and you're able to see various hikes that are available there with the trails, sometimes with photos and with recent reviews that people have done and added onto there. What they also have is different filters, and I love the filters, especially lately, ever since I got my dog. And so I can hit dog friendly as a filter, and it'll automatically tell me all these different hikes that I can do that allow my dog to go on the trail, because there's nothing worse than getting ready, hopping in the car, packing everything, dog included, getting her excited and riled up, and then we get to the trailhead and then dogs aren't allowed here. So it is nice to see, nice to prepare for. There's other filters if you are someone who loves to chase waterfalls or epic views. And so just check those filters out. They're definitely worth exploring. My favorite feature, though, absolute favorite feature that I found in all of the hiking that I've done, especially in remote places like the Adirondacks, is the offline feature. So the offline feature, again, part of the paid portion of the app, but it allows you to save that map and that route. And so if I am doing a 10-mile hike, 14-mile hike, even 5 miles of hiking, you're able to kind of track where you are along that way, which is very important, especially if you get off trail, which has happened to me before, several times actually. And so it's nice to constantly have a way to go back to something that is guiding you. Obviously, there's a compass, there's other ways for you to help figure out where you are, but it is a really nice option to have something that works if your phone does not in terms of service. So I would definitely explore AllTrails and have it as a resource. Like I said, it's come a long way in the last several years, but I still wouldn't wholeheartedly rely on it because technology can fail us sometimes. The other resource that I have been using for years to plan, especially when it comes to winter, is mountainforecast.com. Definitely one of my absolute favorite websites. It allows you to look up a variety. They have a very comprehensive list of mountains all across the US, if not internationally as well. And you type in your mountain. This one, for example, I put in Mount Washington for today, and it tells me hourly what that weather is going to look like, what the cloud conditions are, and what might come up. Two things I would consider heavily before I pack up and go out on a trip are the wind speed, which I have ignored in the past and something I've learned from, usually when I'm on top of a mountain being blown away. And then I remember I should have checked the wind speed, is seeing if there are 40-mile-per-hour winds like there were this morning. Not something I really want to be out there for. So if I was going to hike today up Mount Washington, which I wouldn't, given the snow recently, I would probably wait till later in the day and to be up on that summit. It can always change, of course. Winter, definitely up on Mount Washington, notorious for its weather patterns and changes, but definitely something to consider is that wind speed and also that wind chill. So the temperature is one thing, but seeing that wind chill down there below, I would definitely avoid hiking there today, given the negative 33-degree temperature for that wind chill. But it's really nice. It's a great visual. Again, it's not 100% accurate. Things can always change out with weather and in those conditions, but it is something to have just as a backup. And it is great when you do have service on the trail to see those constant updates. So I can be on a hike and I can see if I'm going to be out for another 2 or 3 hours before I get to a summit. Has that weather changed from when I was in the parking lot or from when I was on mile 1? So it's just something that I've learned along the way is to consistently check the weather because I don't want to be stuck in a situation that I potentially could have avoided or that maybe I'm not fully prepared for in terms of gear. My first winter hike, looks like I was overly prepared, but I was actually not that prepared. I was wearing a ton of cotton. This was almost 10 years ago. A lot of cotton going on there, some flannels and mismatched flannel, a very, very good look. But the most important part are those micro spikes. So this was in November, up on one of the 4,000 footers in Vermont. My friend said, let's go winter hiking. I said, I've never been. Why not? So I loaded up everything I owned that was warm. I had been living in Massachusetts for a couple months. I had not experienced winter yet. And so we went up to Burlington and she told me you need micro spikes. We walked into a gear shop. I was a first-year teacher. I was not doing phenomenally financially. And these micro spikes were, priced maybe $50 or $60. And I was like, that's a little outrageous. I'll take them. I will leave them in the package, nice and neatly in my backpack. And then if I don't use them, we'll return them. She was like, great, better be safe than sorry. So we start up this hike up Camel's Hump in Vermont, and not even a mile in, we needed the spikes. And I was so thankful that I had them, and definitely a great purchase. In the end, I did not end up returning them. And I actually had them for almost 10 years. I don't winter hike too often, so I don't need the micro spikes that often. So it's definitely a great investment to help you get to that summit or even just to get out on a trail to be able to experience winter in icy conditions and not have to not hike because you don't have the gear. There are different options on Amazon on different places that are cheaper. They're not as durable, but they will definitely get you through a hike. So definitely explore some different options in terms of micro spikes or crampons, but they make you feel so much more confident on the trail when you are able to get on ice or feel more comfortable in different conditions. Snowshoes are a different story. We can talk about that a little bit later. But the micro spikes, definitely, they're compact, they're small, they fit easily into your bag. So it's definitely something that I would have no matter what going on winter hikes, particularly with how snowy and icy this winter has been. So definitely thankful for my friend's advice on that first hike a long time ago. So in terms of short hikes, a couple things that you should consider packing. I always take a backpack of some sort, usually a small one if I'm just going out for an hour or two. Doesn't really matter on mileage per se, but if you are doing around 30, 40-minute miles, couple mile hike, always good to have a backpack, definitely a fully charged phone. I've noticed that my phone, the battery dies a lot sooner when it's very cold outside. So I do make sure, even if it is an hour, 2 hours, I like to have a fully charged phone. I always pack an extra layer. I don't always use it because I do warm up as I'm hiking, but an extra layer is definitely recommended. And then always some kind of water, whether that's with electrolytes, Gatorade, and a snack. So always having something just as you're expending calories and you're moving and there's different conditions and you're going up in elevation. Always something to consider is having a little bit of water and a snack. So those are kind of my musts for short hikes. Always pack something. Maybe my backpack's a bit smaller than that day pack, but I always try to have those other components. What I wear now that I've been hiking for years is having insulated waterproof boots are crucial. I do still go out sometimes in trail runners, but then I just end up with feet that are soaked, which I don't recommend for longer than a couple miles of a hike. But also depends on weather conditions. And, again, if it's that condition up on Mount Washington right now with those wind chills and those temperatures, I would not be out in my trail runners. But if I'm doing a walk with my dog for a mile or two and I get a little bit of snow on, I'm going to survive that mile. I just won't be that comfortable. So if there's a way to be more comfortable and enjoy hiking more, then I'm going to pick that option. So one of those are waterproof boots. And they don't have to be anything super fancy, but as long as they're comfortable for you. And then wool socks are something that I have transitioned into in the last few years versus just any sock that I have. Packing a hat and gloves. I used to forget about my hands all the time, and that'd be the first thing that would be very, very cold for me, at least. So I always try to pack a pair of gloves and then having a base layer and then that insulated jacket. Again, in the backpack is already an extra layer of warmth, but having that jacket on, even if I warm up, I can take it off. There's room in that backpack, or I'm going to be carrying it if it's a short hike and I don't have the big backpack. Some things to consider to bring depending on time of day and just if you know yourself best. Hand and foot warmers, those little like hot hands that you can get in bulk. They're great. They work excellent. Just make sure to not have them up against your actual skin when it comes to your feet, having that sock in between with the shoe. But those come in handy. Keeping the hands and feet warm is very, very important when you're out there. A headlamp is also very important. Those short hikes, 1 to 2 hours, I don't bring a headlamp. If it is a sunset hike, which I am doing a lot more often lately after work, and then I do bring a headlamp for that last little bit. My phone probably would suffice with the flashlight just to get that mile down in 30 minutes. But again, you never know where your phone battery is going to be at after taking some pictures of the sunset or whatever else might drain that battery. So better be safe than sorry, and just to have that headlamp. Lastly, even on these short hikes, depending on the conditions, I would look into bringing those micro spikes. Honestly, for winter, they're just always in my car or my backpack, ready to go. Or having snowshoes, again, depending how much snowfall is there, which is when All Trails comes in handy to be able to read those trail conditions. Some Facebook groups that I'll talk about later to join so that you can also kind of get more of the trail conditions. is also a useful tool to know whether to bring snowshoes or not. There are places like the Adirondacks that require you to have snowshoes, depending on the amount of snow or what part of that season it is. So if I think it's over a foot of snow, you are required to have snowshoes in the Adirondacks, and you can get fined if a ranger sees you without snowshoes. That's not a rule here in Western Mass or in Eastern Mass or in parts of New Hampshire for sure, but it is something to keep in mind. Snowshoes definitely make the hike more comfortable as you're hiking. It's difficult. It's not going to be easy, but you aren't post-holing, which is sinking in every step. I've post-holed before because I didn't have snowshoes, and then I was waist deep in snow, having to like grab onto trees or a friend or their trekking pole just to kind of get out from under it, just to then post-hole 3 steps later. So not an enjoyable experience. Then there's snow everywhere. You get cold, and it just creates unnecessary conditions and concerns for yourself. So this is what I would bring and what I'd consider for a short hike, again, depending where I'm going or what I'm doing and who I'm going with. And then for a bit of a longer hike, I would still pack all of this. I would still bring all of this. But in addition to this list, for a half-day hike, there are other things that I would look into. I would pack a waterproof shell. Like I said, the forecast, even if it looks good, things can change so quickly. I would always have something that's waterproof, ideally with like a hood. Maybe if your hat is something that would get wet and maybe not be the best for your head, having that waterproof cap would be helpful. Again, even if the forecast looks like it's going to be okay, clouds can turn into rain pretty swiftly, as we know. I would definitely bring a headlamp at this point, just because you do never know if it's going to be a 4-hour hike or 2 hours. You might get more tired. You might have not packed enough snacks. You might be moving slower, or you're just soaking in the view a bit more, or talking to hikers along the way. And so always important just to have that extra light source so you don't have to rely on your phone. We don't ever want to fully rely on our phone because technology can fail us. I'd also bring more snacks. Love a good trail snack. So definitely having more snacks. It's always better to end a hike and still have food to go and to have some for the car ride home than to be hungry and end up being a hangry hiker. Not fun for you, not fun for your company or for the ride coming back home. I would be wearing a puffy, probably for a longer, very winter type of hike. And then something that I have been doing lately, and in this picture too, up in Vermont, which is very clearly in the middle of winter up there, is wearing some kind of neck warmer or a neck gaiter, even one that you might have like as a headband, like I also have in there. I've used that to kind of like protect my nose, my mouth when it is very cold or very windy, to kind of give an added level of protection, which is very helpful if you maybe didn't pack enough. So always having something for your neck. It can also even be looped up over your ears. So just any way that you can potentially add almost like a shield to the wind and the cold, the better it'll be for you. Some things to consider for a half-day hike would be spare socks. I've had a lot of wet feet in the last few years, and it is not comfortable whatsoever. Whether I'm wearing trail runners or water-resistant boots. So I have switched to waterproof, but if you post hole or if you end up having to do a water crossing that wasn't quite planned, spare socks is always amazing to have and makes the hike much more enjoyable and way more comfortable. I would also bring extra batteries. I have been known to bring a headlamp, feel super prepared, and then it's starting to get to be dark. A friend and I take out our headlamps. She's good to go. She starts hiking, and I feel like I can't see anything. And then I realize my headlamp is indeed dead, which is not helpful. Thankfully, my friends are very prepared, so they'll usually have extra batteries, but I don't want to have to rely on them. So extra batteries is also something that I've slowly considered to keep in my backpack pretty often. When I was doing the 46 up in the Adirondacks, up at the Adirondack Lodge, it's a parking spot that you can kind of go off into several different trails from there and different hikes. And a ranger there had actually asked me if I had a headlamp as I was heading out in the afternoon for a hike. And I said yes. And then he said, do you have extra batteries too? So it is something that people are trying to be more and more aware of because you might get stuck. And just this winter alone, there's been several reports just in the news and online of unprepared hikers for whatever reason. And I've definitely been there several times, as I've already shown. and mentioned with the peanut butter fiasco, that it does happen. It is great to be as prepared as you possibly can be. You can't always plan for everything, but you can try to expect the unexpected. So you can bring an extra pair of batteries. You never know where your battery life is at for your headlamp. Always good to have. They weigh very little. And to be honest, it's kind of worth that extra weight, so to speak, to make sure that you can see coming back down. And then a first aid kit. I usually keep some Band-Aids, a couple little things, but having a more prepared first aid kit just for the possibility, again, with expecting the unexpected, is something that I want to get better at. So that's something I would consider for a half-day hike. For an all-day hike, again, doesn't matter the mileage amount, but more so just the hours spent out in the woods, out there on a summit potentially, and away from very quick emergency response. Because if someone is going to be called, which can happen, it's going to take a while to kind of compose that team, get them there, depending where you are, if they know where you are. And if you are stranded, whether you're injured or not, it's best to have several options so that you're able to get through potentially that night if you are there overnight, as it takes a lot of time for these crews to get to you and then to also safely extract you to get you the help you need. Again, I've never been in that position, but I want to try to avoid as much as possible. One, for the team, the crew that has to get out there and risk their lives out in those conditions, but also for myself and just for future hikers in general. So I try to be more prepared despite having been unprepared in the past. So for these all-day hikes in the winter, I'm definitely bringing spare socks at this point. I know I'm going to get wet at some point with all the snow or ice or falling down potentially. So spare socks is definitely a way to go. Recently, I've added in an emergency bivy to my pack, extremely lightweight. I didn't really know what this was maybe a year or two ago, but it essentially is like a little sleeping bag for you, again, in an emergency, but almost like those little blankets like that you would get after a big race, or that you see people crossing the finish line at the New York City Marathon, and they're given one of those blankets. In an emergency, it gives you that shelter that you need when you don't have a full tent set up or a shelter to get to, or help is coming, but temperatures are dropping and you need to warm up your body. So tiny investment, definitely worth it to me for these all-day hikes. Again, the 1 mile hikes, the 1 hour hikes, the 2 hour hikes, not something I'm going to bring if I'm out there from noon to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But for these longer days, definitely just for the peace of mind and just feeling at ease that I have something if I was to be stranded, I think is kind of crucial to have this item. I would definitely pack a lot of water, a lot of electrolytes and snacks. One issue with the water that I've run into, and I mentioned it down there at the bottom, are the hydration bladders are amazing. It's so much easier to stay hydrated on a hike when you have that little straw right there, good to go, versus having to stop, take out that bottle, open it up, sip from it, and you just want to get moving, or your group wants to get moving, then you have to stop, put it back. It turns into a bit of a hassle. So I used to not drink as much, which turns into a whole other issue of dehydration. But I found that the hydration bladders worked so well for me. So I used them all the time. And then I was on a winter hike and I tried to take in some hydration and nothing was coming out. It had completely frozen. It was solid ice, which was problematic. Thankfully, I was, already halfway through the hike and just kind of managed out with just a small headache, but something to avoid in the future, for me at least, is I would go more for insulated bottles. And then I actually do really warm water in those bottles. So maybe like a Hydro Flask, something like that. I put in very warm water because I know I'm going to be out there in the cold and it's going to cool down as I keep hiking. So I'm not drinking scalding hot water, but by the time I do take in some hydration, it's good to go and it's not frozen solid. Again, snacks are super important for these all-day hikes. Maybe you are packing a sandwich, something with a bit more bang for your buck in terms of calories. And then mostly because I love taking photos, and that drains a lot of battery, but also just to have that connection and source if I do need to call for help, or to check the offline maps on all trails, or just my direction in general. I do have a Garmin watch, so that helps me a lot with the trail routes and where I'm going and my mileage that I'm tracking as well. But I've been taking a portable battery charger and then that, wire connection to charge my phone. So I have used that multiple times on these all day hikes, or on through hiking or just camping in very remote areas. Very, very helpful when it comes to just making sure that I always have a source to call for help if I need to, and to take more pictures because I love taking photos clearly. A physical map is something to consider as well. If you have access to that, I've screenshotted pictures in the past, very, very zoomed in terms of detail. And then I go based off those. But again, I have my Garmin, I have AllTrails, I have different points to be able to help me. So I don't always need a physical map, but it is helpful to have. There's a lot of books out there that also have the trail maps in them. Ben Kimball's books, for example, with the trail runs, he has QR codes in them and you can scan them and have that map on your phone. But it's such a small book that I just pack that book with me when I do those trail runs or other hikes. And then that way I can actually go forward with it along the way. So I have something physical to take. So it could be a book, not necessarily have that old school map, but different options out there. On top of what I'm already wearing from that shorter hike or the half day hike, I'm definitely bringing snowshoes depending on the snow. Micro spikes are already in the bag, but I'm probably already wearing them. My backpack's probably bigger at this point to be able to carry all this stuff. And then gaiters are a great investment as well for your legs. So finding the right size is important, but being able to strap them kind of around your calf down to your boot and it latches on from there, prevents snow getting in. They have nice ones for the summer too. So it prevents like little wood chips or dirt getting into your socks and feet. But the winter ones are amazing, especially if you're going in potentially knee-deep snow with your snowshoes. So gaiters are an awesome thing to have as well. I definitely hiked in cotton, as you saw years ago, but I am actively trying not to wear it. I sweat a lot when I am hiking, and so then cotton gets damp. People say cotton's rotten or cotton kills, so ideally it's best to avoid cotton if you can. Other things to consider is just what you personally might need if you are someone who gets extremely cold as it's getting past sunset or as it's getting further into the evening. Maybe you need extra socks. Maybe you need extra gloves. Maybe you have more than just that emergency bivy if that's not going to be enough. So just make sure that, this is all that I've felt to be comfortable and to avoid potential situations. Accidents do happen. So again, better to be prepared, but you know yourself best. So what else you might need in terms of layers is always better to pack and carry and not use than to wish that you had it. But it's not there when you need it most. That picture on the right is actually Mount Marcy up in the Adirondacks. And that was early October a couple years ago. And as we were approaching the summit, this was the conditions. So thankfully I had spikes. My hiking partner did not. And so he actually got up there, but it was a little touch and go at some points. So I was able to kind of assist him there, but I didn't have extremely warm gloves. So then that's where he let me borrow his more, winter-proofed kind of gloves. So definitely trading gear amongst each other, helping each other out. But it would have been best if we both had spikes and if I had come prepared with proper gloves. My bladder did get a little cold there. It didn't fully freeze, which was nice. But again, unexpected conditions. Early October can still be winter in the Adirondacks. It definitely has been in years past, but it wasn't something that I anticipated going into it. And then that's what we got. Some things also that I've learned along the way that I try to keep in mind as I am hiking, whether that's a local trail, whether I'm traveling somewhere. I'll talk a bit more about like traveling out of state, further south for different hikes or planning trips for hiking, are the leave no trace principles. So the National Park Service recommends these. Leave no trace, I'll fix those numbers, but are 7 principles to try to follow as just like a conscious hiker. Obviously the trails aren't ours, but people maintain them, which is amazing. There's a lot of trail maintenance that goes on that's very impressive, especially after all these storms that we get. And so it's at least to me, important to be able to kind of help be a steward for those trails and those places, particularly because they're not mine. I don't live in some places that I hike. And it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to have access to so many amazing trails. So the 7 principles of not leaving a trace so that we can continue to enjoy these areas for a long time is to plan ahead and prepare, which is what this presentation's covering. A couple others that maybe don't apply to every single time you go outside or in the outdoors are traveling and camping on durable surfaces. Again, I don't camp in the winter, so that one wouldn't apply to me this time, but definitely something that I consider in summer and in fall for sure. Disposing of waste properly. If you pack it in, you got to pack it out. So something to consider would be keeping a plastic bag or a Ziploc bag, some kind of waste or disposal for you, so that whatever you bring in, you're able to bring out. Same applies if you bring your pets with you, having those bags for them whenever they take care of their business. We don't want to leave that for the wildlife in that area. So if it's not natural to that area, we want to make sure that we don't leave a trace. Which goes into that 4th point of leaving what you find, and then minimizing campfire impacts. Again, I'm not setting up a campfire in the winter. I'm not really doing that on the trail in the summer either. Definitely important to check those different kind of fire regulations depending on the kind of season that it's been, and just to make sure if you are doing one, it's in the appropriate place. I don't feel that experienced in it, so I just avoid it altogether to avoid a potential bigger hazard. The last 2, so 6 and 7, is respect wildlife, of course, keeping our distance. Again, nothing's worth that photo, in my opinion, and to be considerate of others. So not blaring music on the trail. The hiking etiquette is if you are hiking up, then the person coming down, if you are crossing with someone, person coming down probably has a bit of an easier way. So your hiking etiquette would be that they let you go since you're putting in the work going up. But not everyone knows the 7 principles of leave no trace. So I always just try to be considerate and respectful of everyone. And maybe they just haven't been exposed to these yet, or they know a few of them, but better to just try to get this message across whenever it is possible. But again, they don't all apply every single time you get out there, even if you're on a local trail, just around a little lake loop, but definitely a handful of them are applicable every single time. The other things to consider, taking it back to packing, are the 10 essentials. It's what people suggest you always have with you. Again, I touched on navigation. I didn't touch on sun protection. It is still a thing in the winter. I have gotten sunburnt in the winter, but maybe that's just me. So it is something to keep in mind. Insulation, we talked about proper gear and jackets, illumination. I think I talked about headlamps a lot, but definitely having extra batteries for that. First aid kits, other essentials are being able to create a fire source. Again, more so just so that you're able to take care of yourself and stay alive if you are potentially going to get injured on trail, which can always happen to anyone. But again, not something that I pack, but it is something that I should consider packing as these 10 essentials. A repair kit, so think of things like duct tape or just having like little bits of extra knickknacks that might help if your backpack breaks, if the strap breaks, or if you do fall and your pants rip. Then that's exposure to the conditions. What can you do to try to alleviate some of that in the moment? Having a tiny little DIY repair kit might be helpful. Nutrition, we touched on a little bit. Again, always better to have more and carry a bit more and fuel properly than to wish you had it and it's too late. Hydration, and then that emergency shelter. Again, not something that I ever really prioritized until the last year or 2, is having that emergency bivvy. Super tiny, compact, but could potentially save my life if I was stranded. Again, not something you might have all of them. You may not need sun protection in that moment or on that one hike. But again, these 10, similar to like the 7 leave no trace principles, always something to just kind of review, keep in the back of your head before you get out there. Transitioning into hiking with some furry friends. So I've definitely gotten a lot more involved in running with my dog and hiking with my dog. I got her after I finished the 115. So I actually haven't taken her on any of the 4,000 footers, but I've done a lot locally and traveling with her, just different parks in different states. So there's a lot of things that I've learned through trial and error of what to do when hiking with her. But even prior to that, I would be hiking with a friend's dog. So definitely a few things that I've learned along the way of hiking with my dog or someone else's dog. So some things to consider packing, just like a first aid kit for yourself. Dogs need the same thing. Whether they get something in their foot, whether something else happens on their paw, not their foot, but along the way, whether they touch a surface, getting ice clumps. That's something very popular for my dog, at least lately with all this snowfall, is she gets all these clumps in her paws. So being able to try to mitigate a little bit of that is helpful and makes her more comfortable. Definitely bringing those poop bags and carrying them out. I did actually get a bag to kind of mitigate that smell. So I can kind of put that bag into another bag. A lot of bags going on. But that way I'm able to kind of carry something out without leaving a trace, which is important to me. And something I also invested in is a dog tag. So in the event that she did get loose off my leash, somehow, some way, it does happen. Her name is on there, my phone number, her address, well, our address, and so a way to contact me. So that contact information is on her for the in case. So I'm always just trying to plan ahead, just because it could happen. Packing more water. Winter's great for dogs. There's a lot of snow, but also just prioritizing that just as you are burning calories and you're moving and you need to refuel, so do they. I don't often feed her on the hikes. I do have something and treats, and food if needed, but I don't often give it to her until we're back, safely at the car. And something I invested in is Mushers Balm, and I did link it there. Just kind of something to be able to put on their paws that helps them with snow or icy surfaces. So just something to consider. Every dog is different, just like we're all different. But consider your dog's breed, their age, their abilities. I have a very, very active Aussie, as you can see in that photo. That's in Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Ohio earlier this month. One of the few dog-friendly national parks that we have, and she was loving it. A lot of snow. She's a big winter girl, but she's able to hike for several hours, but it is something that we trained to get her to that point. Another thing to consider are whether trails allow dogs. Some don't, and that's something that I need to respect. One in particular that I love visiting, at least here in Massachusetts, kind of smack dab, maybe not Central Mass, but Central Mass-esque, is the Quabbin, actually the water source for, most of Boston, but amazing hiking all around, easy parking, a lot of great views, beautiful water, but no dogs because it is a water source. So I haven't visited, too often lately, but it is a great spot if you don't have a dog or if you do and just want to see a new spot. So they definitely do not allow dogs there. Thankfully, we've never interacted with larger animals with her, aside from the occasional deer, but porcupines, ticks are everywhere. So I was just doing a tick check in, honestly, summer, fall, heading into winter. And then we occasionally get that one warm winter day and they like to come alive again. So just kind of making sure that you're aware of what else could impact your dog while you are out on trail. As I mentioned, I just went to, I was on a road trip, so we had stopped in Ohio along the way at Cuyahoga Valley. But something that I absolutely love about winter hiking is that it's the off season. A lot of people don't want to go out in winter. I don't blame them when it's the temperature it is today outside. But for the most part, off season is so great because it's so much more peaceful. It's way quieter. There's way less people. You're not battling for parking spots in the lot. You're not having to navigate in overdrive trying to figure out, well, this hike got full, so what else can I do? And there's a plan A, a B, and a C. Off season's great. I'm a huge fan of winter hiking for that reason. I also just love the solitude of being out there. Less ticks. Again, we're up here in New England, we can get ticks on us. Same with dogs. So way less ticks in the winter, no mosquitoes, always a plus for me. Um, but definitely something to consider is going on different kinds of trips in the winter. So not just staying in New England, but I actually plan trips regionally or further out nationally in the winter just to kind of explore. So I do bring my dog on a handful of them. Some of the ones that I've done are Acadia. Again, a 7-ish hour drive here from Western Mass, maybe a bit less up from Boston, but then you have a bit more traffic maybe than I do. And then Shenandoah National Park down in Virginia, doable to get down there in a day. Same with Acadia, doable to get there in a day. And just so many trails to explore. Both of these parks are extremely popular in the summer and very difficult to find parking in, not to deter you, but it's so beautiful in the winter and you see like a completely different landscape. There's just a whole different scenery to it that I can really appreciate more in winter with a lot less crowding. And so just an option if you are thinking of somewhere else outside New England to kind of dive into winter hiking, maybe further south. It does still get cold there. As you can see in that picture, like that's Virginia, but I was at pretty high elevation. And so definitely still want to kind of follow those guidelines in a way. Again, those are my guidelines. Take them with a grain of salt. But what I packed, what I prepared in order to go out on these hikes down Virginia or in Acadia, better to be over prepared than under prepared on these trips. So I kind of apply those same rules for these hikes too. One thing I mentioned earlier, I get a lot of information from Facebook groups. There's a lot of good stuff in there, y'all. So a few of them that I have been part of in the past or I'm currently part of are the Western Mass Hilltown hikers. Again, even if you're out near Boston and you make your way out and venture out all the way out to Western Mass, it's definitely a treat. I highly recommend it. But this group is amazing. They're a nonprofit group. They come together and I think each week they plan these hikes. They call them flash hikes sometimes where they just piece it together and have people join. You can join to be part of their group. I stay active on the page just to see what else is out there. They post a lot about different groups that have acquired new land and have turned it into more preservation for us to be able to recreate on, which is a beautiful thing to kind of be part of and see more of that. So I definitely recommend that if you want to venture out to Western Mass. They also post a lot of photos. They're dog friendly too. And so it's a great option if you don't want to do what's always on all trails or what everyone else might be doing. It's nice to be part of these kind of smaller, even though that one is kind of large, but these kind of more localized groups. If you do have a dog, great groups to be part of. Hiking Dogs of New Hampshire, Vermont, Mass, and Maine, and then Hiking Dogs of the Adirondacks. So people post hikes they recently did with dogs. They'll post tips, tricks, you name it. Someone will say, I have this kind of dog. I'm thinking about this hike. What do y'all think? And so again, take it with a grain of salt. Everyone's out there hiking with their dog or themselves and their own experience. But I do like to kind of reference that and see maybe I can do this hike, with my dog or with my friend's dog. Or maybe this one's not great because there's a ladder and I don't know how my dog would do on a ladder. And I don't think I want to carry her up a 10-foot ladder and back down. Despite being able to carry her, I don't really want to do that on my weekend off. So join those groups. If you do have a dog, other ones, and these are just a few that I've been part of, but there are several out there, are the Adirondack Trail Conditions. People post in there very consistently about recent hikes that they did, and they'll post photos, and the moderators there kind of require you to post the conditions only, not just, hey, here's a great picture of me up on Whiteface Mountain, but actually saying, here's how the trail was, here's what we interacted with. And that gives you kind of that more detailed all trails review or feedback. Hiking buddies, if you don't want to hike alone, there's always someone up for an adventure. So joining that one if you're interested in the 48. And like I said, these are just a few that I've been part of or that I've heard great things about, but it's not an inclusive list. So a lot more for New Hampshire. There's definitely some for Boston, Maine, and the like. So great if you want to do a meetup, just hear about recent conditions, or honestly just to kind of sift through and learn more about hiking and people's mistakes or some of the, incredible things that they've been able to experience. So something to check out. And that's all I have. So let's open it up for some questions that maybe came up.
Yeah, it seems like we already got a few. So if anyone hasn't added in their question, definitely feel free to put that either in the Q&A or the chat. But we'll go through what has been asked. Are some winter hikes that you would recommend off of the top of your mind?
I'm a Western Mass girl, so I would definitely, Susan, tell you to come on over to Western Mass. We've got this great trail of the Metacomet along the Seven Sisters, and there's a like famous trail race along it. I wouldn't trail run it personally. It's kind of intense, but there are so many different little peaks and summits that you can do along there. And then just honestly looking at the trustees locations that they have, different sites that they have. Like I mentioned, Peaked Mountain is one of my favorites here. We've got Minichog Mountain over here too for like a shorter one, but can be longer. But the trustees really do a great job of taking care of their spaces. You can become a member, and that contributes to them and helps support the work that they do. But I definitely recommend if you're looking for a place to start is exploring some of those properties and come to Western Mass.
Great. Have you ever done a multi-day hike? What was the experience like if you have?
Yeah, so I always wanted to try backpacking. And so a couple years ago, actually, a friend and I were trying to go and do a multi-day trip on Isle Royale in Michigan. It's a national park off the coast of Michigan. Turns out you can't book that in May for June. It's very, very limited, and a lot of people want to go and do it. So we ended up not being able to do that. And then that's when I found out about the Northville-Placid Trail. And so convinced a friend that'd be fun. It would take 9 or 10 days, and let's try it out. It was a lot. It was maybe 120 miles. So we kind of mapped it out, broke it apart, but we'd never backpacked before. And we chose like the most remote part of the Adirondacks to do that in, where we didn't have service for the first 3 days. We learned a lot, and we were out in the woods a lot by ourselves. I think we saw maybe like one hiking party a day, which was nice. Maybe not ideal for like the first backpacking trip. I did actually end up writing about our 9 days on the trail on my blog, so I can definitely attach that in there. I would 100% do it again. I would pack a lot more food because I burned way more than I thought. So there were some days where I definitely was hungry. And then something that we did research was adding in sending packages so we didn't have to carry our food and everything for those 9 days. It was great splitting the weight with someone else. So I've never actually done the backpacking alone. So like my friend carried the tent, I would carry the bear can with food, or we'd swap. But that again would require you to camp in the same tent with the person you're with. So just something to consider, but definitely amazing. It's such a cool experience to be able to just be out there and like you wake up and your only job that day is to hike, prepare food, sleep, and do it again the next day. I don't know if I could do that for 6 months on the Appalachian Trail, but these kind of shorter hikes are definitely something that I would look into.
Cool. Do you have a favorite clothing brand for hiking gear, especially for winter hiking gear?
Mm. I have been going to Eastern Mountain Sports, EMS or REI. It does get a little pricey, but a friend recently recommended Squawk to me, SQUAK, super small, family run, like out of their garage or basement, I think in Colorado. Very sweet, family oriented. They sign the cards when you buy stuff. So very, very sweet company to support, I think. And they have really nice hoodies to wear out on gear as like a base layer. So I did just get one of those recently, and I love it. Has like the little thumb hole as well for you. It's not this one, but it has something like that. And again, the nice hood, kind of like that grid pattern. So I would look into them. They just came out with hats. I got an email today. So maybe some other stuff from
Good.
there.
It's good to know. I know it's always fun to look up like fun, smaller hiking brands, especially because
Yeah,
the larger ones are a bit pricey, but you're like, I
they
want
get
to make
blown
sure that
up and
I'm,
they're good,
yeah,
but there's other options out there. So you don't always have to go with what everyone else has or is talking about.
yeah, exactly. Do you ever go on solo hikes or are you typically with others?
Oh gosh, I'd say like 90% of the time I'm alone, or with my dog. So I definitely started out very hesitant in hiking alone, but I started off very small. I was doing like 0.7 mile hikes just by myself, but I told people where I was. I must have like screenshotted all the blog posts about it. So I knew when to turn left and then I would cross a bench and turn right. Like I knew I had it like this was before all the All Trails comments, several years ago. And so I just had like blog post after blog post, photos, and I could say like this photo's right here. Like I was like over prepared on the trail because I did not want to get lost and end up on the news for being lost on a mile hike. So I definitely, I'm serious. I didn't want to be that person. Could be you, but I tried to avoid it. So I definitely screenshotted a lot of things online. But I just started to get more and more confident as I was out there. I kind of prepared more. I've definitely been in some situations where, maybe it was better if I wasn't alone. But I feel pretty safe out there. Things are pretty marked, or I've just gotten better at seeing the trail and knowing where I'm going to be. And also having a Garmin. I know they're expensive, the watches, but Garmin Phoenix that I have will show me the trail. It shows when I'm off trail as well. You can also send your location to someone via email for free. You can pay to have it to their phone. But I have that with like my emergency contacts. And so they can open up an email. And if there is good service, they can kind of track where I am. So this is like one story my mom loves to tell is that my friend and I were hiking, went for a sunset hike. It was great. And typically when I do hike with other people, we just talk and talk and talk. And so we were heading back down. And then I got a text from my mom being like, hey, are you going the right way? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we're having fun. Like, what does she mean? And then we stopped and looked at the map and we had gone on a completely different trail. So like, it was actually very, very nice to have that contact and for her to be kind of watching despite being 2,000 miles away, but like for her to kind of rescue me in that moment. So I didn't end up realizing an hour later. And then I, at that time, probably didn't have a headlamp. So being able to kind of have that person kind of looking out. So yes, I'm alone, but I'm not ever like fully alone. Someone kind of knows where I am at all times.
I like that she was kind of like living vicariously, and then she's
She
like, and
was, yeah.
also
She
I'm
knows so
saving your
much
life.
now
Thank
about
you.
hiking. Like she's not a hiker at all. And now she's like, is this a loop? Is this an out and back? How many miles? What's the gain? So she's definitely learned more about hiking through me. But
Well,
yeah.
someone asked, what was the best hike you've ever done with Poppy?
Oh, that's a great question. We have a sunset spot that we do. So I get out of school, around like 3 or 3:30 every day. And in the winter, sunset is so early. So there is a little spot here in Western Mass, in Hamden, and it's called Goat Rock. The story goes someone in the 1600s or 1700s had a goat up there and it fell or something. I don't know if it's true, but it's named Goat Rock, and it's just like this big ledge. And so you can walk up there, you can make it a 3 mile hike. You can also make it a 0.2 mile hike if you park in a neighborhood. And so honestly, that's the one that's like the most special to me because any day, if I've had a tough day at school, or if it's just been a long week, I kind of look at the weather, see which days maybe going to have a good view. And then I can just get there at 4:07 and I'm at the top 10 minutes later if I take the short way. And then we just kind of have it to ourselves. It's very busy in the summer because that's when everyone is back home from college and it's back in town. So I kind of avoid it in the summer, but it's definitely my little, maybe not a hidden gem, but there's not that many people up there in winter. So I feel like it's a hidden gem and she loves it. So.
That's so cute. For a beginner, what are the best options for a summer and winter hike? Like, what are the things that you usually look for?
I would probably do something that is pretty popular. As a beginner, it's comforting to see other people when you're just getting started. Because if not, then I feel like for me, at least the doubts kind of started creeping in, or I'd hear something and then I'd be like, what was that? And maybe it was just a branch that fell, but like maybe it was someone else or something else. So just being able to like see other hikers, talk to them, even if they say the dreaded, you're almost there and it's like another half mile and you're tired, like maybe you didn't want to hear that and you wish they didn't say that because it's way more than half a mile because they're potentially wrong. It is nice to just like see someone else. So I would definitely look at all trails and see maybe the hikes with the most reviews on them. Might be crowded, but I recommend just starting early. I love sunrise hikes. I've slowly gotten more and more comfortable at hiking in the dark just because it's worth it for the sunrise. But I used to be very, very nervous about doing it in the beginning. So I would definitely do that. For the summer, you have way more daylight to go, and way more options. I feel like trail conditions are way better in the summer, unless it's like a lot of mud season, which we maybe don't get as much here in Mass that you might get in the Adirondacks or in the Whites. So mud's a whole other issue in the summer, but um, yeah, I think there's so many options, and to like not be afraid to do local spots. I think I kind of chased those lists so much in the beginning because I like to cross things off and they were beautiful and definitely a challenge. But since I finished those lists, it's been so nice just looking up spots nearby and having like I said, this go-to sunset spot, my go-to sunrise spot, and just being able to do something short and quick, but also discovering other ones, like in that trail running book that I mentioned earlier. I just turn to a new page, find something that's nearby, and say, let's go do that. And maybe it doesn't have this like massive view for miles, but I got to spend that time on the trail. So I can't be mad about that.
Cool. And I know you're definitely more like Western based, but from what you know, is there a local like winter hiking group that one can join, whether like it's Lexington or nearby that you know of?
I will look into that. I don't know of one off the top of my head. I know there's tons for New Hampshire and a lot of, Eastern Mass go, further north. But it would be nice to have more of that local spot.
Yeah, I can also do some research, especially since I'm based here. So
Yeah,
whatever is found, we'll make sure that people are able to find those resources.
definitely.
All right, and I think that's the end of all of our questions.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you so much, Olivia. Hope everyone has a good rest of your night. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.